So picture this. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, June 2020. A frantic 911 call comes in describing a brutal home invasion in a really nice, upscale neighborhood. The story is one of pure chaos, violence, a husband desperately trying to save his wife. But the moment forensic investigators stepped through that door, the physical evidence, the science, began to tell a very different and much, much colder story. Today, we're going to look at the anatomy of that lie. That's the voice you hear on the call. It's 37-year-old Matthew Speck telling the dispatcher that he and his wife, Caitlin, were attacked right in their sleep. He's saying he's been wounded and that the intruders had just run off. This call, right here, this is the official story. And it's the story we're about to put under a microscope. So Matthew's version of events was pretty straightforward and absolutely terrifying. He said two men burst into their bedroom, a struggle broke out, and he got hurt trying to fight them off. By the time he was able to grab the phone and call for help, he said his wife was unresponsive, their dog was missing, and the attackers had just vanished into the darkness. But, when first responders got there, the scene just didn't add up. Right away, there were these huge contradictions. This was supposed to be a violent robbery, but all the expensive stuff, laptops, wallets, jewelry, it was all sitting right out in the open, untouched. The house wasn't trashed at all, it was actually pretty neat. And that was the very first major red flag. Okay, so with that story already feeling a little bit shaky, investigators started with the most basic question you can ask. How did these guys get in, and maybe more importantly, how did they get out? And this, right here, is where the whole story just completely crumbles. Not because of a hunch, but because of straight-up physics. This became this central, massive problem with Matthew Speck's entire story. He's on the phone saying he chased the intruders out of the house, but when police show up just moments later, the house is completely locked down. So how is that even possible? The forensics team went over every single point of entry. And listen to this. The front door wasn't just locked with the deadbolt, it also had one of those internal chain latches, the kind you can only lock from the inside, and it was secure. Every single window was sealed. Every screen was perfectly intact. There was absolutely no sign that anyone had forced their way in or out. It was just physically impossible for someone to have run out of that house and left it locked up tight like that. So this all led investigators to one very stark conclusion. At the time this crime happened, the house was basically a sealed environment, an airtight capsule. Nobody got in and nobody got out until law enforcement broke that seal themselves. The intruder story wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible. So with the whole home invasion theory just collapsing, investigators turned their attention from the house to the only living witness, Matthew Speck himself. I mean, if his story about a violent struggle was true, his body should show the signs, right? But his scars, well, they told a very different story. The evidence was literally written on his skin. Think about it. Real defensive wounds are messy, they're jagged, deep, and usually all over your hands and forearms. Matthew's wounds were the complete opposite. They were shallow, they had clean edges, and they were only in places on his body that he could easily reach himself. The blood stain patterns even confirmed he was standing still when he was cut, not wrestling with anybody. Forensic experts actually have a name for this. They're called hesitation marks. And they are the classic signs of self-inflicted wounds. They're made carefully to look bad, but without causing any real life-threatening damage. So now the two main pillars of his story, the break-in and the fight, have both been completely disproven by the physical evidence. And then there was the family dog, Bailey May. She was a golden Labrador, and the neighbors all said the same thing. She barked at any stranger that came anywhere near the house, always. But on that morning, before any gunshots, there was just silence. And that really only suggested one thing. Whoever was in that house was someone Bailey knew and someone she trusted. So the what happened was becoming pretty clear, but the why? That was still a huge question mark. With the physical story totally debunked, investigators got a warrant for Matthew's phone and his computer. Their thinking was, if the crime scene was a staged performance, then the script had to be written down somewhere. And boy, was it ever. You see, while the house itself was an airtight capsule of lies, his digital devices were like a black box recorder, capturing every single thought and every chilling step of his plan. And the searches, they were so specific. This wasn't just some morbid curiosity. He was doing his homework. He looked up things like how to stage a crime scene, how to fake a robbery, and he even researched escape routes from his own neighborhood. This wasn't the behavior of a man reacting to an attack. This was a man executing a very carefully researched plan. And his digital life laid out this classic two-part motive. On one hand, he had reconnected with an ex-girlfriend and clearly wanted to start a new life. And at the same time, he was really frustrated about the financial side of a divorce, specifically losing the house that he loved. So, in his twisted logic, murder became the solution to both of his problems. So in the interrogation room and later on in court, Matthew's story wasn't just met with accusations. It was confronted with this overwhelming mountain of scientific fact. And that was the logic trap, the one question he could never, ever escape. He insisted he chase them out, but he just couldn't explain the simple physics of that locked door. You know what his only answer was? He suggested they were phantoms. That was it, a last desperate attempt to escape the undeniable truth. He really had no answer. At the trial, the prosecution just laid out the evidence piece by undeniable piece. The pathologist explained the hesitation marks. Ballistics experts showed the shots were fired calmly, not during some chaotic struggle. And of course, the locked doors and that digital footprint proved both premeditation and the simple fact that his story was impossible. Faced with all that science, the jury saw the truth crystal clear. It didn't take them very long to decide. Matthew Speck was found guilty on every single count: premeditated homicide, cruelty to an animal, and unlawful use of a firearm. Matthew Speck was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of ever getting out. And the judge specifically pointed to his attempt to manipulate the entire justice system as a major factor. In the end, his carefully built story was shattered by a handful of simple, undeniable, scientific facts. It's a chilling case, and it really leaves you with the question: in this age of forensics, can a lie ever truly stay sealed inside a locked room?